This is Yang. I'm from Jinan Institute of Quantum Technology and the University of Science and Technology of China. Thank you for the conference and the organizer for inviting me. My talk is on our recent experiments on twin field quantum key distribution with sending or not sending protocol. Okay, so I would like to introduce the twin field QKD very briefly. Twin field QKD is a new type of quantum key distribution protocol proposed in 2018 by Professor Andrew Schultz's group. This protocol greatly extending the range of secure quantum key distribution with current possible technology. That means we do not need to use quantum repeaters or quantum non-domination detection or other fancy technologies. So it's possible for us to actually perform the experiment recently in this. So there are quite a lot of following up works either on the variant protocols to improve the performance or quite a few experiments till now. I will focus on our experiments, and this is not the full list. There are quite a lot of work in just 2 years. So first, I will talk some quickly performances before the TFQB. Here are some list of QKD experiments targeting on long distance key distribution. By the way, the size of the circle is the secure QCrypt. So from about more than 10 years ago, maybe 15 years, the transmission distance is increasing in experiment. Till very recently, either with decoy state BBD4 protocol or with MDI QKD, actually about 400 kilometers transmission distance achieved. Is there any limitation to the distance? There might be, actually, especially in practice. Let's use some very practical, very ideal parameter, for example. Let's set the system frequency to 10 gigahertz and use a very perfect detector with 100% efficiency and 0.1 discount rate. The transmission distance using single mode fiber is about 500 kilometers, mainly limited by the dot count. Even if we eliminated dot count set to 0, the security rate is just 0.1 hertz per second. So it's not that practical to improve the performance further with just this kind of protocol. To achieve longer distance and to improve the system performance. One possibility is to use quantum repeater, and that is the future. We hope to use quantum repeater to extend the distribution distance. And for current technology, we're just using the trusted relay to construct quantum networks, either using fiber to perform the classical to perform the like the 1,000 kilometers fiber network, or using satellite as a classical. But still, the point-to-point quantum key distribution is the key to the fiber network. So improve the performance of point-to-point network is one of the most important things still in the quantum key distribution network. So that is why I think TFQB is important. Here, I summarize a few of the key generation rate in quantum key distribution. For example, example, in single photon BBD4 protocol, it's very easy to see that the secure key rate is proportional to the channel loss. And it's similar for other protocols like decoy state, HBBD4 protocol, or MDI QKD protocol. Although the coefficient for each protocol is different, they are all proportional to the channel loss. There are a few theoretical works on this topic. In theory, they already proved that the highest key generation rate in QKD is almost to the channel loss, especially in they call it in TGW and the PLB bound. They are not limited to the protocol I just mentioned before. They are also true for other protocols like CV QKD. In TFQKD, the key rate is proportional to the square root of the channel loss. So this square root proportional is very important because it's possible to achieve even longer distance, like 500 kilometers. In about more than 200 kilometers in practice, it's possible to achieve even higher key rate than the PLB bound like we mentioned. One other note I want to make is the security rate of TFQB is proportional to the single quantum repeater bound. Okay, next I will introduce the TFQB protocol very briefly. In general, sending and receiving quantum key distribution, we perform the encoding in Alice secure zone and sending the quantum pulses to the channel. In Bob secure zone, we perform the decoding. And next, in MDI QKD, Alice and Bob both perform encoding. In the third-party, untrusted third-party Charlie or maybe Eve, he performed the detection. So that is possible to enhance the security because all the attacks to the detection is assumed not a problem in theory. For example, in the time-beam phasing encoding in MDI QKD protocol, Alice and Bob are sending signal pulses with reference pulses. The encoding information, the relative phase are encoded between the two pulses. The twin field QKD is very like the above MDI QKD protocol, but the Alice and Bob are just encoding on the signal pulses. There's no relative phase between two pulses. So they are just encoding on the global phase of one pulse. And the difference in detection is Charlie is detected in the one photon interference instead of the two photon interference. We are using sending or not sending TFQKD. This is a variant of the original QKD performed by Professor Wang. And in this distribution protocol, we have two bases. In this basis, we are sending the signal in small probability, and in the other probability, we are not sending to encode 0 and 1. Actually, the sending is 1. And in X basis, we are sending the 3 different intensities for decoy state encoding. And for all the pulses, the random phases are encoded. In experiment, we are encoded in 16 different phases. So after Chinese detection, we have provided a table to see if it is correct or incorrect. Actually, it's not evaluated. In X window, we just keep the small amount of the event that the relative phase is within a small phase difference between 0 or pi phases. The phase and the phases in the Z window are never announced. So it's possible to for us to use the decoy method in theory to analyze the one photon detection and one photon gain. I'm not going to the detail of theory and the security proof, but since we have the decoy state method to estimate one photon component, and we can estimate the flipping error rate in the X window, so we have the final secure key with fluctuation and the statistic in account. So as a very short conclusion for this part, we have TFQB for now. The channel, the key rate is it scales with the square root of the loss, so it's possible to achieve longer distance and higher key rate. And we have SNS TFQB as what we are using in our experiment. With this method is because it's not announced the phase information in the basis, it's easier to analyze the security in theory. We can use the decoy method. And also because we are using a fixed the probability of sending, the QBER in the basis can be very small. So it allows high basis in X basis. That is, we are allowing the interference to be not that good. Especially it is a one photon interference transmitting to a longer fiber distance. So next, I will talk about our experiment. Why it is not easy to implement this protocol mainly because it's using single photon interference. So that means we need to use two independent lasers with exactly the same wavelength. And that means the laser should be narrow bandwidth and also to be exactly the same. And also we need to compensate the fiber phase fluctuation. Also in the SNS protocol, it requires the dark counter rate of the detector to be very, very small. So next is our expandable setup. Here, we are using two independent laser sources. The laser source we are using is narrowband laser locking internally to ultra-stable cavity. I'll introduce it later. The two laser sources locking through a separate fiber link. And we set the fiber link, the length of the fiber link to be at least the same with the signal fiber. The signal, the current light is split in signal channel, and in this channel, we have a phase modulator to modulate the different phases, and we have 3 amplitude modulator to generate the signal pulses as well as the phase reference pulse. Entirely, we interfere the two signals from Einstein bulb and beam splitter and detect the signal using superconducting single photon detector. Okay, so the phase stabilization is the key to this experiment. The phase interference may be not that good because the phase fluctuation, and this may come from the wavelength difference or the fiber length fluctuation. To make sure that everything will be good, the first thing is to make sure the laser is good. What does it mean? It means the laser is a narrow bandwidth laser, and also that is not enough. We need the central wavelength to be very stable. For example, if using a narrow bandwidth laser in lab, the central wavelength, if it is fluctuating, still the interference result is fluctuating. Here we use a 20 kilometers unbalanced interferometer for testing. So that will test the central wavelength fluctuating. And the testing result for our cavity locking laser is the best in either the interference result. We can see the spectrum of the noise. It's also the best. Length of this laser is about 1 Hz. It's very good. And the next thing we need to do is to lock in the wavelengths in Alice and Bob to be exactly the same. But we are doing this by splitting the laser into two. One is internally locked the actual stable cavity using PDH technology. And the other part is sending from Alice to Bob. Bob lock his laser wavelengths to Alice with using a detector. And his locking result is split into part of this result is going to the QPD system. And to eliminate the phase fluctuation in the path, we send the laser back from Bob to Alice. And Alice is also locking the phase difference using a photon detector to see the beating. We are using 9 ADFAs in this 500 kilometer fiber that control the signal intensity below this threshold for stimulated Brownian scattering. So we tested the locking result. First, we testing using a single source with 150 kilometers fiber. The fiber drifting, the phase drifting rate is about 7.1 radius per millisecond. And next, we're testing using two independent lasers locking to each other through 500 kilometers fiber. The drifting rate is about 9.6 radius per millisecond. So by this 500 kilometers, we mean that both the source are separated by 500 kilometers with the this locking fiber and also the signal fiber. So actually, we attribute the phase drifting mostly coming from the fiber itself. The next thing we need to do is to compensate the fiber phase drift because of the thermal noise or the sound noise. So we are designing a signal pattern with sending between signal. We are sending some reference light, very strong reference light for phase estimation. In every 5 microseconds, we're sending in 3 microseconds for signal and the other 2 microseconds for the reference, phase reference. Sending in at least for 4 different reference, and actually the phase difference are the 4 phases. So we can model the result, and we can estimate and optimize the relative phase between Alice and Bob to get it to calculate it. So there are a few requirements for our design because we want to estimate the phase difference of the signal. We need to set the wavelength of the reference light and the signal to be exactly the same. And also, they need to travel to through the same of the fiber path. So also, we need the intensity of the reference light to be relatively strong. In our experiment, we set it to about 2 megabits per second for quick estimation. We can do this estimation in 10 microseconds. So that requirements, that's a strong requirement for detector because we need the about 2 megahertz detection rate. That's the positive detection rate, as well as very low dark count rate for signal, actually in very short recovery time. So we're using simple conducting nanowire detector with some improvement. We use parallel configuration in 9 different parallel detector units to reduce the connected inductance and to reduce the recovery time. We're using 50 ohm shunting resistor to prevent the detector from latching. So in testing, we have 10 megahertz detection rate with continuous light input. And that means it's possible for us to use 3 megahertz as a post test. And we are for the duck count, we are using the detector integrated inside the detector, a narrowband filter to reduce the duck count from the thermal noise, and also to reduce the insertion loss. A smaller active area of 16 micrometer is also a possible method to reduce the duck count from the detector itself. So we achieve about 60% of the detection efficiency with about 3.5 hertz duck count rate. Next, I will show our experimental results. There are some parameters in common. We are using just a normal fiber spools in transmitting the signal. We did not do stabilization, so we think it is possible. This fiber spools are most practical. We can put it into field test without some more modification. And also, we are setting the failure probability of the protocol to 10 to the minus 10, considering the finite size effect and the statistical fluctuation. In our first experiment trial, we achieve about 150 kilometers transmission distance. We're using a detector with rather high duck count rate and relative high system efficiency. We did not do the phase modulation optimization, so the Q-bar in X species is rather high, actually. It's more than 10%. But at the same time, we proved it's possible to generate secure keys and transmission through long distance with this protocol, even if the X species Q-bar is high. And besides, we are using some gating method in our experiment. We set some gate in timing for the pulse. We only keep the central part of our pulse, so the time difference in the rising or falling edge will not affect the phase interference. And also, we are setting the gate for phase estimation. We only keep the part of the signal that we are confident the phase estimation is good. Next, we improve the phase modulation, and we also using a bit better photon detectors with about 100 hertz duck count rate. So here we achieve about 300 kilometers distribution distance, and the secure Q rate is actually higher than relative PLB bound above about 240 kilometers. Here you can see that the phase error can be controlled to be very small, actually, in experiment through 300 kilometers. And in this experiment, the phase modulation and phase interference is good. So we do not use any gating in the phase estimation. We keep almost all data because of the phase estimation. The Q-bar in ZBase is a bit high. This is an optimized result from theory. Although we are sending the pulses in ZBase basis a bit higher, so the Q-bar might be higher, but actually we have more K rate because the pulses are higher. So next, we perform the final experiment with ultra-low duck count rate, about 3.5 hertz, and about 60% of the detection efficiency. With this parameter, we achieve 500 kilometers distribution distance using ultra-low loss fiber. And in 400 kilometers, the Q rate is orders higher than previous experiment, the decoy state and MDI QP experiments. In this in performing this experiment, we found there are a few other sources of the noise. So besides the dark kernel itself, there's a noise from the relay scattering. Generally, when we think about relay scattering, if the direction of the relay scattering is the same with the laser, it will not affect the signal from the reference because we are sending the reference pulses, very strong reference pulse, as well as small signals. The relay scattering in the same direction will not affect the signal because the wavelengths are the same, there's no dispersion. And the scattering in the backward direction will not affect because it's different direction. But actually the backward scattering will generate another backward scattering. So that will be the same direction with the signal. Although the relay scattering is not strong, the relay scattering, this is what we call this two backward scattering, can distribute uniformly in time domain with the signal. So we cannot distinguish this noise from our signal, either in timing or in wavelength filtering. We model this effect and estimate the noise of the relay scattering to be about 10 count per second for our experiment. This is already much more than the noise from the detector itself. But it's still good for experiment in 500 kilometers. It might be problem in even further experiments in the future. So we are introducing the two-way communication in the post-processing in our experiment. For two-way communication, we can consider we are getting some result from the 16 bits, and then we group 2 bits together to perform a parity checking. In doing this, we can eliminate the output with the wrong bits and decrease the QBER in Z basis. For the QBER in X basis, we can estimate the using standard two-way classical communication method. Actually introduced this thing in 2002. To the phase error in X basis may rising, but because the QBER in Z basis decreased dramatically, we have gain. And there is observation that the QBER is not uniformly distributed in the out or the even parity. So if we just keep the out parity 16 bits, we can further decrease the QBER in the basis. And if we can actually preparing the bits in out parity, we can actually further enhance the system performance. So here, you can see that the original QBER is about 10%, and after this two-way communication, it decreases to about 1%. Although in the X basis, the phase error increases about double its phase error rate from 6 to 13. But actually, because the Z basis is a big decrease, so the distribution distance can be longer and our Q rate is actually higher. In this 500 kilometers, in using the standard two-way communication, we already have higher Q rate than absolute PLV bound. If we are using out pairing or LPV pairing method, we can achieve even higher Q rate. So that is what we have for our experiment for now. And next, in the future, we hope to put the TFQB in field testing because the parameters we're using in our experiment is, I think it's rather actual in practice. So there should not be much difficulty in putting it to field test. And we hope to improve the system in the future and I hope to see other experiment either performing in free space or using other variant of the original TFQB protocols. This experiment is done in University of Science and Technology of China in Professor Qiang Zhang and Professor Jeremy Pan's group. And I would like to thank our collaborators working on theory in Tsinghua University, and they're working on the high performance single photon detectors in Shanghai Institute of Microsystem and Information Technology, and the company providing us the ultra low loss fiber from Corning instrument. And also, I would like to thank the funding agencies for our experiments. And I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to clap for all the audience. Thank you, Dr. Liu, and we are open for questioning. So again, remind everyone, please type in your question in the Q&A section. And I see here that Bruno has raised his hand. That's actually quite early on in the talk. Is there a question from Bruno? Okay, let's see if I can, no. No, okay, I don't get a response.
Okay.
Hold on. No, okay, I don't know. He's allowed to. Okay. Oh, there is a question from Dev. I'm going to allow him to talk here. And his question is, what's the largest distance on which qubit is transmitted so far?
Okay. I think we have 500 kilometers transmission of the quantum key distribution. And I remember there's another work it's also transmitting qubit about 500 kilometers. I think this is the longest distance in fiber for now for quantum key distribution. And also in Jeremy Pan's group, we are performing the key distribution and also teleportation and other things with satellite. So it's possible to transmit with about more than 1,000 kilometers using satellite and free space.
Very good. Any follow-up questions for that? Okay, I have a couple of questions. Again, the work is very, very impressive with locking the laser to 1 hertz with the kind of distance that you have demonstrated. It's basically really the state of the art in the devices in the detectors and in QKD itself. So my question here is have you tried to do the asymmetric? How sensitive is this experiment when you have the distance Alice to Bob and Bob to, Alice to Charlie and Bob to Charlie distance? There's an asymmetry. I know your laser line width is very narrow, so that should give you an advantage in doing the asymmetry. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. And as for asymmetry, I think it's much a theoretical problem because the theory will tell us how long we can distribute if using asymmetry setup. And we discussed with professors working on theory, and our result is we can have some kind of asymmetry, like for example, 100 kilometers asymmetry, the performance will not decrease very much. But if the asymmetry is too much, for example, if for one side is 400 kilometers, for other side is 0, maybe I'm not quite sure if we can get a final key. There are some limitation for this for the protocol we are using for now. We hope to put it into test in the future, because this is also one thing that is important in field testing in practical scenarios.
Right, exactly. Do you foresee any experimental difficulty in implementing an asymmetry experiment?
I think there's not much difficulty in putting into experiment. We need theoretical support,
Okay.
actually. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question from Roloff. I'm going to enable the voice. Roloff, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, first of all, for your talk. And I was wondering, what kind of optical fibers did you use when you found a noise of 8.6 on the 500 kilometer distance?
Okay, thank you for a question. We're using ultra low loss fiber from Corning. Actually, in our experiment, in our testing, we found the noise, really scattering noise, is much related to the channel loss, actually. So if I'm using standard fiber with similar the similar loss, the noise should be similar. It's not much different.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Harold. Harold, go ahead. I have enabled your voice.
Hi, great experiment, but wouldn't it be easier to just use one laser in the middle, so at Charlie's position, distributing the light instead of this cumbersome synchronization?
Yes, thank you. Yes, it's much easier to use just one laser to distribute light to Edison bulb and getting back. But we have some security concerns, because if Edison bulb are not using independent lasers, we have the security concerns if there can be some Troy house attack to the system, if there is a channel input into the encoding system. It's much harder to guarantee the security. So we decided to use two independent lasers. Although it's very hard in experiment, the security should be higher.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up. Yes, you are using the two independent lasers, but you still have a locking mechanism. So there's still a laser signal coming out of Alice, going to Bob, and coming back for locking. So wouldn't it the same attack that can be launched there? Is there an argument for, potentially you're still opening up this possibility?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think the scenario is a bit different, because in our locking system, we actually it's not the same as because the laser is not coming from Charlie to Alice system and going back to Charlie. The path is different. In our locking experiment, in Alice and Bob's laser is. The laser itself is just sending out pulses, and the locking is a kind of beating. So it's a beating from the continuous laser in Alice, and the light from Bob, it's a beating to a detector. So in general, a Troy house attack, if you want to perform that kind of attack, the signal should be coming to the system and going back. But for our system, the input channel will never going out to the system. And also, I think this locking is used as a reference. In our experiment, actually, we can keep the system locking for example, for a few minutes, and then we keep the locking channel breakout for 1 hour. The system can be running because our system, our cavity locking system is very stable.
Okay, okay, thank you. Next, we have a question from Marcos. Marcos, I have enabled your voice. Go ahead.
Hello. Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate for the talk and for the amazing work. So it's really fantastic. And I just have a curiosity because there are some skepticism in the field whether or not MDI-QKD or twin field could be at some point or eventually relevant for free space communications, or they are too challenging. So from your experience, I just wanted to know what is your opinion.
I hope I get your question. I think it's possible for free space communication because I know that in Pan's group we have already performing at least trying to perform the MDI-QKD experiment. I don't know if they already have the result, but yes, I think we have some good results in performing MDI-QKD. And it's even more challenging in doing TFQB, but still, I think it's possible. I'm not quite sure if this is the best choice for free space communication using the satellite, because it's moving the channel distance between Alice, Bob, and Charlie are always changing. So it's even harder to compensate the path difference. But at least for now, I think it's worth to try.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Dev again. Please go ahead. I have enabled your voice. Hello? Okay, then I will ask the questions. I'll read it off the Q&A. It says, how can we maintain the coherence in qubit during such a long journey of qubit transmission? I mean, noise fluctuations during path.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thank you for the question. It's actually a very good question. Let me see if I can have some slide here. Yeah, the coherence of the qubit coming from a few different paths. The first important thing is the laser itself. Because we're using very narrow bandwidth laser, the coherent length of the laser of the qubit is very long. So we can tolerate the length difference for this is the first thing. And the next thing is we're locking the two lasers, as you know. So actually, when the qubits getting together in Charlie, it is coherence. It is coherent. And the next thing about the fluctuation, we are using the reference light. We can read out. Actually, we can estimate the phase difference between Alice's fiber and Bob's fiber at Charlie. We can do it very fast. Yes, there are some. There are the phase fluctuation in the past, like for example, you can see that it's about 10 radius per millisecond. It's drifting very much, but generally you can think about in about 10 milliseconds, it is stable. So it's possible for us to compensate the phase difference.
Yeah, okay, very good, thank you. And finally, we have a comment from Chang in response to Marco's question. He pointed out to your archive paper that's typed in the Q&A session. And that is MDI-QKD experiment in free space. I think everyone can see the questions. Chang, I'm going to enable your voice if you want to add some comments to that.
No comments, thanks.
Okay, all right. So I think everyone can see the Q&A, so they will see your link.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. We have no further questions. So thank you very much, Dr. Liu.